So Tua Tagovailoa, man, he's back, expected to be back week 8. Bruh, this changes the game, obviously, for this Dolphins team who's coming off the bye in week 6. They're playing this weekend, week 7. They're going up against a Colts defense that's been struggling. But I think the bigger question here, P, is like, what does this do now for the rest of these Dolphins that we've been panicking on all season, right? Like, we know Tua has a concussion risk, obviously. Like, are we buying
Hmm.
him? Tua, Tyreek Hill, right? He was a top 3 wide receiver off of the board. And now we're talking about him in like the wide receiver 2 tier with Tyler Huntley here at quarterback. A lot of effects here for this Dolphins offense. Talk about Tua's return, man, because this thing is going to change a lot for this offense, bro.
Yeah, I mean, Tua's return, it means everything for this offense fantasy wise. Um, it's for the like Tyreek's going to come back to being a top 5 wide receiver. You're going to see Achan coming back to to his ways. It's really everything that we have been waiting for. So I like Tua coming back. I'm not afraid of him getting hurt again. I think that they're going to, I think that he realizes how serious it is. I also feel that he may even come back with one of those padded joints on his helmet.
Oh,
The
yeah,
first
yeah, yeah. You
quarterback
think
to do
so?
that. So yeah, I think so. If anybody's gonna do it, it's gonna be Tua.
Poster child for that
Yeah.
shit.
It's like they made that shit for him.
Yo,
But
I
yeah.
look at Tua though, and I'm like, he's been an elite guy, but this is also we notice with Tua in the second half when like this fall winter weather starts to come around, like he's already a guy that like kind of tears down a little bit because they lean on the run game. So when I think of like Tua returning, I don't. The thing is, it's not like this isn't an ankle, it's not a shoulder, it's not a wrist, it's not an elbow. So it's not like we really even like have to worry about a downturn in performance. Like he comes back immediately into the QB1 tier. It's just a matter of can dude stay on the field because like he can't take these kind of hits no more. And he did so well last year with avoiding that hit, and most of this year, obviously, until it actually happened.
Mhm.
I want to believe in Tua, but it's tough for me to put him in like this top 10 tier when I really think he's more of a QB2, not just because of the risk, but also this change in weather does kind of throw things, you know what I'm saying, a little bit in loop here for Tua and the rest of this Dolphins passing attack, I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, so you're not gonna quite you don't want to put him in like a top 12 QB moving forward.
So no, that's the issue with Tua is that I think because of the way he plays and the way we perceive this Dolphins offense and the weapons around him, it's like we want to put him in this top 10 to 12 quarterbacks. And I think
Mhm.
at floor, like I could call him like he's a floor QB1, maybe like a floor high end QB2. But we've already talked about this P in the offseason. It's like that schedule gets a little harder as the season goes on. That playoff schedule, last game in Cleveland does not always sound good in December. So I think of Tua as this. I think of Tua as like kind of Kirk Cousins, Jared Goffish, like a name that we know has potential upside on a weekly basis, but we're probably going to see more bad games than we really visualize in our head. I think he's more like Jared Goffish than he is like a Dak Prescott or a Joe Burrow or somebody that's a locked in QB1 right now. I think you could
Okay.
sell him as that though.
You could definitely sell him as that. I mean, just kind of going through the games, right? So, the winner is going to start like, let's say, like what, around
Like week
week.
11, week 12 is when things start getting dire.
Yeah. So, week 11 against Vegas, right? They're at home versus Vegas. They're at home versus New England. They're at Green Bay week 13, which is going to be a crazy winter game. But then they're home against the Jets week 14, week 15 at Houston. So that's going to be a good weather game. Week 16 against the Niners is going to be tough, but still, the Niners have kind of been getting carved up as far as the secondary goes. And then week 17 at Cleveland, right? So, yeah, I get the weather thing. I don't think it's going to be that much of a factor because it looks like a lot outside of Green Bay. There is like they're going to be either at home or on a West Coast team, or you know what I'm saying? Like, and
The only thing with this offense, right? Since Mike McDonald's taken over, Tua, and this is over the last 3 seasons, Tua's only had one 300-yard game after week 11. like one, and he's played in a number of those games. So I think the upside that you hope for, like we see it, those 400-yard, 4 touchdown games that we see Tua throw sometimes, I think that's just capped a little bit. So when you talk about upside for some of these other quarterbacks, it's like, yeah, maybe on a weekly basis we could see Tua throw like 250 and 3 touchdowns, but like I think more often than not, there's a reason why this team invested in Jaylen Wright. A team invested in Devon Achane last year, why Raheem Mostert is still on this team. And that's because they will go to the ground game. They'll use Tyreek closer to the line of scrimmage. They'll use Jaylen Waddle a little closer to the line of scrimmage when this weather starts to settle in. And it's a timing offense, unfortunately, for Tua, who we know it's well documented. He doesn't have like the strongest arm to be able to throw through any kind of weather. So yeah, you mentioned a couple games in Miami, but in Miami, sometimes it's windy and rainy. Like, then you talk about Green Bay and Cleveland in November, December, and it's like, we know that's going to get ugly. So for every peak, I think there's a valley with Tua, and that's the biggest issue, is that you have to treat him as an every week quarterback one, when in reality, he's probably going to fence more along the QB2, the QB2 radar. So I like the player too, and I think over the course of the season, I might have said, oh, you're a top 12-ish type play, but like just knowing what we know about this offense in the second half, I gotta call Tua more of a high-end QB2 at best.
Okay, so if there's like a panic meter, right, on Tua, as a high-end QB2, like what is that to you? Just talking about the weather, the schedule, and how they're playing.
I think when Tua coming back, here's how I'd play it, right? Like I would treat Tua, and I don't know if you agree with this. I would treat Tua as like a trade option right now. You went this whole season without him over the last 5 weeks, right? So I would be looking for one of those quarterbacks that maybe has not been playing up to our level. You might be able to flip Tua for like Anthony Richardson in a piece. Give yourself a little bit of upside. You might be able to flip Tua for like Dak and another, like somebody in that same range. I would be looking for the ceiling here over the second half as opposed to the floor with Tua, because I think once we see Tua on the field, and if he doesn't have a 300-yard, 4-touchdown, it's like the expectation now will be dialed down for what he's going to be capable of the rest of the season.
Okay, so you're taking Tua. You would trade Tua for like, and would you target like a Pat Mahomes?
No, I wouldn't target Pat Mahomes. It's just that's a name value because you got to pay for the name right now, right?
Yeah.
So if I was thinking of like potential quarterbacks that I would be like trying to target for with Tua, the first one, obviously, I think for me, and this is a Jaylen type thing, but A-Rich is definitely like a name that I would be targeting, because I think the person who has Anthony Richardson is probably looking for a little bit more consistency, and the name Tua sometimes speaks a little bit better than like Anthony Richardson does, especially if he plays bad. This week, they got a tough game against Miami. They're going to be going back and forth. So Miami's been one of the better defenses in the league. But I think I'd be looking for him, be looking for like a Dak Prescott. I think Dak is a good name you could buy low on. He's on a buy right now. So him and Tua would be coming back both in week 8. And I think I would just be looking for like that range, that back end QB1 range, or maybe a little bit higher ceiling than that. A CJ Stroud, who hasn't necessarily been a top 5 guy yet. Maybe you're pairing up Tua with another piece to go get him. I think I would use him more as a trade piece. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah, I think so. But the only way that I would be trading Tua is if I'm getting like a lock, if I'm getting like a top 4, top 5 guy, right? And the reason why I'm not as, I guess, my panic meter, if I did have a panic meter, it'd be pretty low on Tua, not just because of health. You mentioned the weather. I just think the variance between like quarterback 8 and quarterback 14 is so low. It's very minute, right? So if I can get somebody who is like a bona fide stud, who throws a lot of touchdowns, if I can get like, like I don't think the trade would make sense to the recipient if I'm targeting like, I think Brock Purdy is going to be a better quarterback than Tua.
I knew that name was coming out.
Yeah,
that's a perfect name though. That's the perfect name.
Yeah, like I would go target like a Brock Purdy for like a Tua, but I don't know how well that's going to go out. Like, could you get a Jalen Hurts? Could you get, I'm just kind of going down the list of like, these quarterbacks and trying to see who I would target, because I just don't think the difference between one quarterback and the other, if we're talking about like a back end versus like a quarterback 2.
Yeah,
we're talking about a difference of like 10 points. as the season, like 10, 15 points as like the season ends.
Well, real quick, obviously, like the Tua thing is its own thing, right? Quarterback in a lot of single QB leagues, you can start, 12 quarterbacks and find somebody to start. But like the receivers, I think on this team is where the bigger impact is. Tyreek Hill has been pushed down all the way to like wide receiver 2 status. Are you buying or selling Tyreek Hill, knowing kind of the same information we just talked about, the schedule, Tua's return, the timing, the fact that he could get injured again, in his first week back, as we saw a couple years ago, he came back, got hurt really quickly. Are you buying Tyreek Hill now? And if so, how are you valuing him? Is he top 3 guy for you, top 10 receiver? Like, where would you buy Tyreek Hill if you are buying?
I'm buying Tyreek. I'm definitely buying Tyreek Hill. Last year you can make that argument of, he fell off last year. Well, he was playing hurt, right? And you could make the argument of like, oh, well, they're terrible in the winter. Look at last year, right? Well, that offense last year was primarily running through Tyreek. It seemed like Tyreek had an agenda early on to really break that single season receiving record. And that just became the identity of their offense. So when they didn't have that, it's like, okay, where do we pivot now? Right. And then that's primarily where you've seen Tua's struggles coinciding with Tyreek's injury. You can't bank on injury. I'm still seeing Tyreek as ultra talented in a scheme that fits him well with now a healthy quarterback. Yeah, I think Tyreek is, cemented as a top 3 wide receiver. I wouldn't see any reason otherwise. Earlier in the season, we're looking at his playoff schedule, right? We're looking at, the Niners, him going against the Niners, him going against Cleveland. Cleveland is just playing uninspired, and they're probably selling a lot of their defensive pieces now. Unfortunately, this new defensive scheme with the Niners offers up a lot of points towards wide receivers, right? Like Charvarius Ward doesn't look like himself. Deommodore Lenoir looks like a stud, but we're talking about like game-breaking speed with Tyreek. So
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like I still would be buying Tyreek now.
I think it's hard for me to buy Tyreek at like old draft prices, like top 3 prices. I don't think I would do that. But if somebody was panicking on this offense a little bit, I'd be looking at like top 7 to 10 value and really trying to find value there. I'm not going to overpay for Tyreek Hill right now just because of a little bit of the concerns I have. His mega games typically come at the beginning to the middle of the year before things happen. So I'm there with you, but I do think the sneakier play here is Jaylen Waddle. I think that's the receiver that I would be targeting because with Tyreek Hill, the name value is still there. We know like he's still going to command a wide receiver 1 price tag for whoever's trading him. But Jaylen Waddle right now, you might be able to get him at like flex prices. Somebody might be willing to drop Jaylen Waddle right now just because of the name. And we know like if Tyreek Hill ever goes down, and even on weeks where he doesn't, it's like if Tyreek Hill has an off day, typically that's when we see Jaylen Waddle have a strong day. So for me, I think if you can target Jaylen Waddle and get him in that back end wide receiver 3 flex kind of area right now, and just take a gamble on him with some players on your bench or maybe some outperforming waiver wire pickups that you had, like I would be sending out a lot of offers right now for Jaylen Waddle before we see Tua Tagovailoa on the field, because when he plays, like Jaylen Waddle is a high-end wide receiver 3, more of a wide receiver 2 than anything.
Yeah, no, Jaylen Waddle definitely got some great value. He would be the one I'd be targeting to try and get at a discount. And just to be clear, I'm not buying Tyreek as a top 3 wide receiver. Like I foresee him doing that, but if I'm a buyer, I gotta talk him to like a back end wide receiver 1, or like high end wide receiver 2.
Top 3 prices, bro.
I mean, hey, I do got deep pockets, so maybe.
Yo, and Jaylen Waddle right now is the wide receiver 59 on the year. Another selling point. He's already had his bye. And we know, like I said, this is a player who typically finishes as like a top 15 to 20 option when it comes to wide receivers.
Yeah.
Moving on to this Colts team, man. The Indianapolis Colts are getting a player back. And they got a lot of weird things going on with this team right now, P. You got Anthony Richardson, who is he's healthy, then he's out, then Flacco, and he's getting back, and now we get him back on the field, even though Flacco's playing well. We have Michael Pittman, who was thought to be out for a few weeks, then says he's going to play, then actually plays decent, but still says he might go on IR. So question marks there. Like, obviously a lot of things going on with the Colts, but I think the biggest question mark so far for me has been Jonathan Taylor. A guy that was performing really well while he was the starter. It looked like the old Jonathan Taylor, and yet another ankle injury for Jonathan Taylor, dealing with the high ankle. He's missed the last 2 weeks, expected to miss this week as well. How are you treating Jonathan Taylor right now? Because I think he's an elite asset. This high ankle, it tends to linger, and this is an injury that he's had before. There was a thought he could be on the field for week 7. He's going to be out. How are you feeling about Jonathan Taylor right now? Are you buying or selling?
So if I have Jonathan Taylor, I'm holding, right? If I don't have Jonathan Taylor, I'm actually looking to target him, right? Because people know how long high ankle sprains tend to take, right? Especially for running backs. But the thing about Jonathan Taylor, and the reason why they didn't put him on IR, is because his last leg injury, when he had the surgery, they were saying that surgery had helped that high ankle sprain kind of be a little bit more stable.
Yeah.
So it's not as severe as people think, which is why he's not on IR. So he's out this week. I think now is the perfect time to actually buy him because the owner doesn't know what to do. Right. The owner's going to be afraid. And you just got to talk that talking point of like, this is a high ankle sprain on a running back who already has that leg injured. So I'm definitely buying him. I think he's going to be back to maybe 80, 85% by next week. So, I'm not necessarily concerned or worried about him. If you're the owner, you just got to hold him one more week. I'm pretty confident he's going to come back.
I think there's 2 scenarios with Jonathan Taylor, unfortunately. And I think one of these scenarios is you are a team that's probably 2-4, 3-3. Maybe you don't feel very good about your team because you took Jonathan Taylor with the high draft capital pick, and you're probably not going to get the same return on him at least for another 2 to 3 weeks. It's just that's the nature of high ankles, and he's out this week especially. So you missed the last 3 weeks with him. He has a bye coming up, and I think if I was a team with a losing record, if I was 1-5 or 2-4, or I had a losing record, I might consider moving him because I would be expecting him to be an RB1, and I know at least for the next couple of weeks, we're probably not going to see a high percentage of those games. So I think selling wise, Jonathan Taylor, if I was a good team, I'd be looking to buy Jonathan Taylor. I think. Now, okay, I'm 4-2. I'm 5-1. I can eat a couple bad weeks from Jonathan Taylor and still make the playoffs and still have a stronger team heading into the playoffs. Now I'm more interested in that conversation. So I think it matters which side of the record you are on right now with Jonathan Taylor because these high ankles, sometimes they linger and sometimes they get worse. I know you talked about, I think it was the tightrope surgery he had. I think they have a surgery where it makes it a little bit, I know I probably butchered that. So if you're an injury doctor watching this, I probably fucked that up. But I know they did something to where you talked about it. It makes the injury less likely to occur. It lessens the impact of it. So yes, I'm there with you on Taylor, but I would not be looking to buy if I was a losing record right now. I think their situation matters when it comes to Jonathan Taylor.
So if you're a losing team, let's say you're 2-4, right? You have Jonathan Taylor. You mentioned that you're selling him. What exactly are you looking to get? And another point to that question is at what point do you think it's like, damn, I got to make a trade for the immediate, but if I sell my studs, albeit if they're hurt or not, down the stretch, even if I do squeak in, I'm just like, I'm going to be an easy out, right? So when I'm looking at this, the reason I'm asking is because when I'm looking at this and I'm like a 2-4 team, I feel like if I sell my studs, I'm just mailing it in, right? And I'm like maybe trading for depth, in hopes that I could do another trade now. But if I'm going to speak to that.
The thing is, this is a really good conversation because I think in trade talks and fantasy, the talk is like never sell your studs, or if you're going to trade, make sure to get the best player in the deal, and that doesn't always need to be the case. Sometimes you got to make moves that help your team out. And at the end of the day, if I can go acquire maybe a stud that's not performing, maybe that's the way I can get a win in the deal when you do trade a stud, right? An upside piece that somebody else got for free, but I know it's going to be a rosterable player for me, a starter for me. So when I trade one of my pillars, which I have done before, like I don't mind trading a stud, and I think that's the misconception is everybody's like studs, you can't move them at all. They're going to be better. People wait till the floor is the lowest or when their season is in the gutter in order to make a move. You have to be proactive. When I trade a stud, I make sure I'm getting at least a player that is similar caliber back. and I'm probably taking an L with their most recent performance. So if I trade Taylor and I want to get a running back, I'm thinking I probably can get like a Josh Jacobs and another upside player who I know is a starter for me, right? I can go get a starting receiver, a wide receiver too. Then maybe some a Brandon Ayuk, a George Pickens, somebody in that realm just off the top of my head. But I can now pair two of those options who I think have upside to help me. And now you don't lose that star appeal. You also keep the star appeal. But what it does now is it gives you a little bit more ceiling. That ceiling that you're worried about losing in the fantasy playoffs, you can gain a little bit of that back. That's what I typically try to do when I trade my studs. I don't know if that's how you move the same way.
Yeah, I think the way that I move is before, like, I'm not opposed to trading my studs at all. The way that I move, and just assuming like nobody's hurt in this conversation, I'm going to be trading up primarily until I get to a point where I feel good about my team. And then I can trade my studs and then get more depth or whatnot, what have you, because I have now, I feel like a solid, more studs to kind of like, to rely on my team. So I have a higher floor. So before I start trading my studs, I want to acquire maybe one more stud and then another stud can go. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but what if your record's 2-4? You don't have that. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have that same luxury. And sometimes your back, when you're feeling not maybe not record wise, but when you feel like your back is against the wall, you're like, damn, I don't know if I can go another 2 weeks with this team that I have right now. And Jonathan Taylor, I don't know, I could go another 2 weeks and like try to acquire studs, and people aren't really trading. So I may have one trade to get this shit done.
In that scenario, if if Jonathan Taylor's out, in that scenario, what I'm looking at is probably like two solid, like high floor players. And somebody I'm looking to buy low on. You mentioned getting Josh Jacobs and like a Brandon Ayuk, or Josh Jacobs and like a Pickens. I don't know anybody who would probably give you like a Josh Jacobs and for somebody who's hurt, right?
For a Taylor?
For a Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. Like, I mean, but I do think somebody who doesn't have, because Josh Jacobs, they probably spent, a second or a third round on Josh Jacobs, right? But you can probably go and get somebody like a James Conner and a Pickens, right? Somebody who does have like a higher floor and like somebody who has upside, right? Like,
let's be real. If I was like, yo, here's this deal that came in, I'm sending you right now James Conner and Pickens, and you have Jonathan Taylor, P, there's no way in fucking hell you're accepting that deal.
No, what do you mean? If I'm 2-4 and I got
you are not accepting that deal, P.
Listen to me, bro. If I'm 2-4, this is what I'm gonna do. Because look, Pickens, I foresee Pickens' value jumping up with Russ there, right? Yeah. From him being just completely ass and forgotten about on the verge of being dropped, he has like wide receiver 3, even like back in wide receiver 2 value, in my opinion, with Russell Wilson there, right? And then I get the Arizona running back who, he has a decent floor. Like James Conner has a decent floor. They do run the rock. I just got to make sure, before they mail it in, I go and grab that rookie over there. That rookie from
Benson,
I
hear you, and it's like but I think we're not talking about like we're not like solely like, I don't think we're off. Like I think I said Josh Jacobs, you said James Conner, but like those are the kind of moves you're getting. What I'm not doing is taking like, Tyrone Tracy and fucking Romo Dunze for Jonathan Taylor. I'm not doing that. Like I'm not taking Ray Davis and Alan Lazard. Like I'm not taking these one-off players, these guys that 2 fringe guys that we found on waivers to give up my stud player. So if you can find a way to get like some upside on the back end, now we're talking, right? Like that is the way to trade. So I think when it comes to trading studs, a lot of people have this misconception that like, if I trade away my stud, my season is over, and it doesn't have to be. When we get to the fantasy playoffs, that shit doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because anything can happen. I've had great teams, great stud and star power in fantasy champions in playoffs and championships, and lost. It happens. And sometimes we find gems throughout the year that can help us. So the main thing is if you're a losing team right now, your goal is not championship no more. Your goal is getting to the playoffs where you can make some shit happen. And I think if you're 2-4, 2-4 is not even really room to panic. 1-5, 0-6, your season's not over. You just need to make changes right now.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And also just, players tend to play hot too. If you find somebody who's like a few years back, Jeff Wilson really won a lot of teams their fantasy championship.
Jarek
That's why I
McKinnon,
was,
we've seen the same thing.
yeah, exactly. So kind of picking those players up. But yeah, if you're 2-4, if you're 2-4, I mean, yeah, I could definitely see myself selling some studs.
We talked about like watching the bye, and I think it's also cool to like make sure we pay attention and talk about teams that are on buys right now. The Dallas Cowboys are heading into the bye, P, and it's one of those teams where like we know who the studs are on this team. It's CeeDee and it's Dak. That's really where it starts and stops. If you want to call Jake Ferguson in there, that's fine. But we have not seen the Dak that we saw last year. And I think a lot of people are frustrated right now with the CeeDee Lamb that we're seeing this year, even though he's the wide receiver 9 on the season. Kind of gives me like the same feeling of like a Bijan and Brees Hall, who are like still top 10 at the running back position, but people are scared. And I've seen a lot of like people saying, hey, should I be panicking on CeeDee Lamb right now? Do I trade CeeDee Lamb? And I don't know that that's the right move. Like we saw him get extremely hot last year where he was like 25, 28 points a game. How you feeling about CeeDee this year? Because he got paid, Dak got paid, and sometimes when players get paid, we don't see the same output. It doesn't feel like that's the case to me, though. It just feels like a bad string of games here.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like a bad string of games, and then he's going to have his bye. But he's only had one or two 20-point games. It's definitely not the CeeDee that you expected. It's definitely not the CeeDee you took in the top half of the first round. I am of the belief
sometimes.
Exactly, right? Like you can't panic on him, right? You can't sell him. If I don't have him, I'm looking to probably send some trade offers to him because the owner of the CeeDee Lamb just probably, unless he drafted immaculate after that, probably has like a 500 or below record, right? So I'm looking to buy him because it's a similar situation as last year. Through the first 4 weeks, CeeDee was like, he wasn't CeeDee, right? Dallas, they couldn't run the ball last year, and then they just let Dak cook. I do believe that that's going to happen again this year because their running game is non-existent. They're off of a bye. CeeDee's a little bit more vocal. You can see CeeDee chirping. You can see his frustrations. And whether it's like directly negative towards Dak or whether it's like in support of Dak, he's still like talking. You know what I'm saying? So I think that they're going to at some point realize that the offense needs to go through CeeDee. So I'm buying CeeDee. If I don't have him, I'm buying. If I do have him, I'm definitely holding him. I'm not considering trading him at this point in time.
There's no way I would be trading CeeDee Lamb. And you have to treat these assets sometimes. And I talked about this with the Jonathan Taylor take. It's like sometimes you have to treat these assets as they are, and you can't it depends on your record, but like CeeDee's not hurt. He's not playing bad. He's just not playing up to your expectations. And literally, there hasn't been a lot of high scoring this year, right? So 140-point game from CeeDee Lamb might have you thinking a whole lot different about this season. And I think the fact that he's on a bye and maybe you have him in your 2-4, your 3-3, you're like, damn, I want to have my guy. I can't afford another loss. That's what's in the back of your head right now. And it'll be easy to move him for like a Jaden Reed or for like a Malik Neighbors. And I think in your head, you're probably thinking like, this is a good deal for me because I got to get wins now. And that's not always the case. You can find in fantasy, P, the average person thinks that one player is to blame for their whole season. Like, I made this wrong pick. When it's really a collection of your overall talent. It's your entire team, and you have to take inventory of that and say, do I have enough hitters to make a championship run here? If your answer is no, you need to go acquire more hitters, whether that's free agency or sending out trades. And it's like sometimes you sit on the shelf too long, you're not able to get that done. With CeeDee Lamb, that's the kind of player you want to have at his floor right now. I don't think you trade him right now.
Definitely. You definitely don't trade him. A lot of things tend to balance out as well, right? When I say that, it's like if they have a rough first half of the season or first quarter of the season, and they're looking like a back end wide receiver one, whatever, top 12, and they're generally like a top 3 or 4 wide receiver, generally that balances out. So they're going to have those blow up games that they haven't been lacking. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to be at the bottom of his production, trade him so that somebody else can benefit from the top of his production. right? So if he's running at like wide receiver 12, 13, 14 right now, you want to have him and make sure that you're aware that these if you don't have him, if you do have him, you want to make sure that you're aware that these blow up games will come to balance his seasonal stats out, right? Because at this pace, he's definitely not going to finish as like a 1,100, 1,200 yard type of guy, right? That's not who he is.
Might.
No, he won't. No, I mean, if you're talking to the you're talking to the CeeDee owner, I'm saying, yeah, he might. He might just have 1,200
You mean that floor? I was like, bro, he gonna clear it 1,100, 1,200 yards.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I'm saying right now he's on pace for that. When in reality, he's like a 1,500 yard type of receiver, right? So those games are going to come. You want to be the one to benefit from those. If you have them, hold them. If you don't have them, I'd say go and get them, right? I'm more the one to try and go and get them so I can benefit from those games. And his schedule hasn't even been that tough, bro. It has not been that tough.
Last year, there was a lot of the same chirping about CeeDee Lamb, and he hasn't had a 100-yard game yet. He's only had one 20-point fantasy day. Last year after the bye, CeeDee Lamb came back out 3 straight 100-yard games. And it's like, at some point, he was holding out. Sometimes you need a training camp. There was money going on. The bye is a reset for a lot of star players. After the bye last year, CeeDee Lamb, in the 10 games that he played, 11 games that he played, he had 9 games with a touchdown. 9. He only had 2 games where he didn't score. 158 yards, 191 yards, 151 yards in the 3 games after the bye. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to miss out on the peak because we ain't seen it yet. Mm-hmm. Hold CeeDee Lamb, don't panic. Same thing when we talk about CeeDee Lamb. Dak Prescott has consistently been a top 10 quarterback in fantasy, like over the last few seasons, consistently. Whether we want to admit it or not, whether, you can say whatever you want about him on the real football field. But when it comes to fantasy, he's lightweight underrated. And if we're expecting a CeeDee Lamb explosion, this guy was the QB3 last season. You think there's some upside for Dak Prescott, who I think might be a floor candidate right now.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, I think he finished the last 10 or 11 games as the QB1. And what's even more beneficial to this team for fantasy purposes is the fact that their defense is ass. They can't stop the run. They're going to have to fucking throw the rock. They're going to have to air it out. When you can't run the rock and you can't stop the run, you have to do something. You have to turn it around quick, bro, because you already paid these guys. You know what I'm saying? And all you got to do is let them cook. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
I think so too, man. It wouldn't be surprising, it's a bye week. They didn't go trade for a receiver. That run game been a little suspect there. Might be a running back that they might have to go, saying, come back.
AK action, maybe, man. Them guns may be coming out, baby.
Shooter's gonna shoot. AK-47. 41. But AK-41. Man, let's move on to another team that's on the bye, P. The Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears. And Caleb Williams, bro, I'm not going to lie. Like, when I was like, he's going to be up and down this year. But they've had a really nice schedule here, and he's played extremely well during that time. And a lot of people are probably wondering, like, yo, do I have a QB1 right now? Do I have a QB2? Like, is he just playing good right now? Or is this the Caleb that they drafted at number 1? I think with Caleb, man, we're still going to see a mixed bag. But, like, even coming after the bye, they have Washington and Arizona. It's up for him schedule-wise. This is probably one of the more fantasy-friendly schedules that there is. And we talked about this in the offseason, like the Bears that do have this schedule. Keenan Allen is getting healthy. Feels like Caleb is getting a little bit more secure in his role. Are you buying Caleb Williams as a rest of the season QB1? Or do you think this is just like one of those spikes in production here over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, I wish I had Caleb right now because I'd be selling the shit out of Caleb Williams right now. Look, Caleb Williams, he has a great cast around him, right? He has, he has all the name value right now. The number 1 overall pick looks like he's flourishing. Coming off like 2 30-point games against Carolina and Jacksonville, probably the easiest 2 teams to get 30-point fantasy point games off of, right? Coming off a bye, you got Washington, you got Arizona, and then look, week 10 on, you got New England, who is no punk against quarterbacks. Green Bay, you got Minnesota, you got Detroit. You got San Francisco. You got Minnesota again. Then you got Detroit again. They have not played. Have they even played the NFC North yet? No, they haven't. And the NFC North, they have not played any division games. The winner is going to start wintering over there as well. And you know what I'm saying? I think that he's going to get exposed. I'm not buying him. I'm selling the shit out of him. And yeah, I mean, that's just what it is for me. You know, it's a good story. I hope he does keep it up. But there's a reason why Chicago has never had like a 4,000-yard passer, right? And they've had talent at the wide receiver position. They've had talent at the quarterback position. They've had talent at the running back position. But that winter winter's no punk when it comes to Chicago, right? So if I have them, I'm definitely selling them. The schedules were rough.
I think I'm waiting to sell them. I'm waiting to sell him. Like the deadline is until like normally like week 11, something like that. I'm waiting to sell him. Like you see what he's doing right now against the Colts, the Rams, the Carolina Panthers, Jackson. Like it's been the easiest schedule. It continues after the bye. Washington and Arizona. When that Washington game hits, when that Arizona game hits, now I'm sending out these damn offers because they got home games in the winter against Green Bay and New England. Then they got that playoff schedule against Minnesota twice, who we know confuses the shit out of quarterbacks. We know it happens. He's going to take a lot of sacks. Detroit, even though it's a good game, that defensive line is no punk, obviously without Aiden Hutchinson, but it's a division game as well. So, and you mentioned it, like they got home games down the stretch too. I think that would be the moment I'm looking to sell. But right now, I think people are probably like still wondering, where is he? Is he QB2? Is he QB1? When they play Washington after the bye, and it's Caleb versus Jaylen Daniels. Ooh. And if he has a great game, we will now be selling Caleb Williams. You got to look for the moment in the storyline because everything that's going to be force-fed, if they do win that game, which storyline kind of says Caleb Williams wins that game, just storyline-wise. It doesn't make sense for, like, Jaylen Daniels to take over everything. Like, it makes sense story-wise to have them two neck and neck.
Okay, the refs may be throwing a little bit more flags over there. Then, huh? Yeah, trying to keep it close.
I think Caleb Williams is a sell, but it's a wait. I think we wait right now because if he has a spike week here in the next week or two, or it's a combination of those, you could probably get whatever the fuck you want for him.
Yeah, I see. I think you could do that right now. You know, you could do that right now if you eat his buy. And then you could sell him as if like because he's coming off the two highest points. Like you're a quarterback. 2 30-point games back to back. Offense looks good. Like, what more are you waiting for?
Well, he had 23 and he had 29. 23 and 29.
Oh, you know, I'm looking at this. The league I'm looking at is probably inflated, probably like a 6-point per
bonus scoring and stuff.
Yeah, those bonuses, yeah. But like 2 high-scoring games, right? Like this is where it is. You know, like I get it, you can wait, but like, how is his ceiling going to be any more higher than what it is now?
I think it will be. I think that's the point. Is like when you go up against 2 soft defenses coming up, we know both of those games are probably gonna be projected for like 50 points on the total. Like both of them are Arizona and Washington. Yeah. So the only thing is, like, if I were to ask you right now, okay, what's considering selling high right now for Caleb Williams? Like, what kind of quarterback would you expect back, or maybe what kind of player 1-for-1? Because he's probably your backup quarterback, and you're probably wondering, like, do I start him or not? What kind of player are you getting for him? Maybe say it's after the bye, after you eat it. Like, what are you looking for?
After I eat the bye, like, if I can pair him up with something and get like a Joe Burrow, I think that's a win. Right? There's not that much difference between how they play, but Joe Burrow we know is consistent. Joe Burrow we know plays up against the competition, and he has 2 good wide receivers. You know,
Joe Burrow owner's not doing that. They're not like, oh yeah, give me Caleb and another piece for Joe Burrow. They're not doing that right now with Caleb.
But if you can get a Caleb, like if you can pair Caleb and get. Like, what are you thinking? Like Caleb and like a Stroud, or Caleb to pair up something like Stroud, Caleb to pair some up. You know, even if I can do something and do like a 1-for-1 deal and get like a Baker Mayfield, I wouldn't mind that.
It's tough, man. It's tough because like with Baker, with Purdy, it's one of those situations where like, you know, I think we all know he's a rookie, and I think we all know there's going to be some inconsistency. So it's tough, right? And it's like I look at a Kyler Murray, like even that kind of player is tough to move because the name value from those guys, we've seen it in action. And a lot of times you're taking the starting quarterback away from the guy and we know this is the backup, right? So I think with Caleb, it's one of those situations where you have to take inventory of your team. Like if he's your starter, I actually think you have more power in that. If he's your backup, I think it might be harder to move him in a single QB league. In a super flex league now, I think you're on the right track. I think in a super flex league where you're running him as your second and then somebody else, maybe they need a little bit of help at a different position. Now you can trade one of those guys that's been outperforming their ADP alongside with Caleb Williams to go get a more secure quarterback. So I think that if you're talking super flex, I think you're on the right track.
So yeah, and a lot of leagues are super flex. I'm not really talking about the single QB leagues because single QB leagues, like it would, we're not talking about moving quarterbacks.
Would you rock with him as your starter in your single QB league?
Probably not. It's like single. No, I mean, I probably would, knowing how I draft. Like I wait on quarterbacks anyway. With single QB leagues, there's going to be hella QBs out there anyway. But if you're talking about moving him, look, what's a sell high candidate for like a wide receiver position right now?
I would say you mean buy low or sell high? Like you're trying
sell
to buy
high. Like who are you selling high on at wide receiver or running back?
I think I'd be looking to sell high on like a Malik Neighbors right now for the highest.
Oh shit, yeah. So if you pair Caleb Williams and Malik Neighbors, right? You can go and probably get you can go get like you can go get a CeeDee. You could hella get CeeDee. You can get like maybe even a Tyreek.
And another piece. And we don't
you get a Tyreek and a Tua, a Tyreek and a Tua, bro, a Tyreek and a Tua because he ain't even coming back yet. Damn. Be like, bro, he gonna get concussed again.
I'd be selfish.
But and we hope that doesn't happen. But if you could do something like that, then that's where you win. Malik Neighbors is a super sell high. You ain't lying.
Man, I think you can do a lot of damage with those two players or a combination of like Caleb and another player like that. A guy that's just been outperforming where they're supposed to be. So get creative. I would say that. Get creative when it comes to these Bears players. Also, are you buying a Keenan Allen real quickly? Are you buying a Keenan Allen bounce back? Obviously got the end zone look last week. He's been like floating at flex value. A lot of people were concerned about him after the injury. You buying Keenan Allen as a wide receiver 2, or do you think he's wide receiver 3 flex the rest of the year?
I think he's a high-end wide receiver 3, probably a back-end wide receiver 2. Yeah, I'm not mad at Keenan Allen because I think Keenan Allen operates as a safety blanket, right? He's like a watered-down like Diggs, right? Like there's a lot of people to throw to there, but again, we're talking about like the winters, right? We're talking about the winters and how they're going to affect this entire team, right? And you would think that they have a running back who can like pound the ball. I think Swift is more of like a scat back. You get him in space. I don't know how well that's going to work when it's snowing over there and the winds are crazy. But the reason I like Keenan is because they have that connection. If he's healthy, I do like him as like a, maybe even like as far as the high end, like a wide receiver 2, like a back end wide receiver 2. That's his ceiling, in my opinion, because he can get these touchdowns. He can, he gets targeted. He's like a PPR monster over there.
I think the person who has Keenan is probably like thinking, I can get rid of Keenan now because he had a good game. Like the person who doesn't know what they have. And I think on a weekly basis, you're right. He's more like wide receiver 2-ish on any given week. He could be a wide receiver 1. Like that's his upside. So yeah, I think getting him and having him as like your flex is optimal. If you have a team that's strong enough to like go get him at a flex spot, shit, I might be moving a quarter. Yeah. Like you talk about moving a quarterback for a player, like that's the kind of player I think can help you win down the line. And I know the winners are there, but I think that's actually a better thing for Keenan because he gets a lot of short looks anyway.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about another team, man. Obviously, with injuries, it's always tough to gauge like the output of somebody, like what we can really expect. And Jonathan Brooks, his practice window's been open. So this is a player that was drafted as like a top 25 running back pretty much unanimously across the board, depending on who you asked. I'm not trying to pat my own back or nothing, but you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to pat my own back or nothing. But if you drafted him, you probably spent, a pretty good pick on him trying to get him as your RB2 or RB3. Unfortunately, he didn't come back in week 4 when a lot of people thought, he goes on PUP, he'll be out, he'll be ready to go week 5. We're talking week 7, week 8, week 9 now when we're going to see Jonathan Brooks back. How are you? Are you like, hey, I got to go get this guy because he's going to be a difference maker on my team? Or are you more on the fence of like, yo, I have him. Let's see what the waters look like for Jonathan Brooks because Chuba Hubbard's been balling. He's a top 5 running back in fantasy right now. And I find it very hard pressed to feel like Dave Canales is just going to bench Chuba Hubbard and give Jonathan Brooks the workload immediately.
If I don't have him, I'm not like trying to get him. I'm not actively looking to get him. If somebody's willing to sell him to me, I'm probably not spending a lot of money on him. If I do have, I just think that his value is just that, right? Like I don't just trades out of the window. When he comes back, am I excited about him? No, I'm not excited about him. Like what, I know that he's going to be catching passes. I know he can be electric, but he's also coming off of knee surgery. He's on a really not a good team. And it's very rare that you're going to see a running back be elite or play elite on a terrible offense. That only happened like a handful of times in the past 10 years, 15 years. I think he's just going to be serviceable. I think he's going to be like a back end wide receiver too. Flex worthy type of running back.
This is the player everybody's like, oh, he would have been a first-round pick if he wasn't hurt, if he wasn't coming off the ACL. And, oh, my gosh, this is the next Todd Gurley. And it's like, you don't always see that in year one. Like, Todd Gurley was an outlier. That season was an outlier for him coming off of the ACL, and not everybody rebounds the same way. Obviously, this one is taking Jonathan Brooks more time to get back. People that were drafting more assuming he would be ready week 1 in the offseason. Like, that was the early talks.
Yeah.
And then right before the season started, that's when it was announced he would be on PUP. So I think overall, it's like, I think the community is a lot higher than even like the real NFL and the team's expectations are. This is a losing team. It's not like they're going to the playoffs. So you have to take that into account. Like, they're going to want to see the development, but you don't want to injure your star running back again. Like, it doesn't make sense when you have a guy that's capable, had 90 yards in the last 4 games in Chuba Hubbard since Andy Dalton's taken over, 90 yards in every game, 4 catches in every game. He's been able to carry the workload. So I think the bye is coming up for this team in week 11. If we're going to see a slow phase in for Jonathan Brooks, maybe somewhere in the 5 to 8 carry range, something to get him comfortable on the field. Remember, he's a rookie, no training camp. This 21-day practice window is really his offseason. We got to chill on the expectations for Jonathan Brooks, and maybe after week 12, we can start talking about him as like potentially a flex candidate. You see it in Buffalo right now. Ray Davis, is he going to get more of a workload? Tyrone Tracy, is he going to get more of a workload? Braylon Allen is going to get... A lot of times we think these rookies are going to come in and do a lot of work. It takes an injury before we see them really produce on the field.
You see, I think it's different though. In a lot of cases like that, you gave the examples of Ray Davis and Tyrone Tracy. Well, these teams have something to play for, right? New York is, they have talent to play. They have talent, and they're not a bad team, right? They're still right there in it. Buffalo's obviously elite. Carolina doesn't have shit, right? And in fact, their glory boy of last year has proven to be absolute garbage. So the one thing that they have going for them offensively is Jonathan Brooks. That's the one thing that's going to make their fans happy. So they wouldn't play him if he's if they know he's not fully healthy. I don't think that. I think when they do roll him out there, I don't think we're going to see much of Chuba Hubbard, because Chuba Hubbard's not selling jerseys. Chuba Hubbard's not selling tickets. Nobody's coming to that team to see Chuba Hubbard. From a fantasy perspective and fantasy players, we like Chuba Hubbard based off of what he's doing. But from an NFL standpoint, they got to sell tickets. They got to fill seats. They got to have something of a hope. And right now, this is the only real thing that they're banking on. So I think when he does come back, then I think he's going to take the reins, right? They're going to make sure he's healthy. But when he does take the reins, I don't think Chuba Hubbard's going to be in the conversation because of that.
I think it's one of those situations where, like, you're right about the winning aspect of it, like, especially when this team gets losing. But that's why week 12 seems like the most optimistic for me. Like, if it's going to happen, it's after week 12, because he's got us. It's not just a surety that he even has a role. Like, real NFL, he has to beat out Miles Sanders. He has to. Like, Miles Sanders has been a terrible backup, but in real football, he's got to show that pass protection's there. He's got to show that he can hit the hole the right way. He's got to show that, like, he's a good NFL player. I think he will show that. That's not what I'm saying. But he has to prove that over Miles Sanders. Then he has to be able to prove that over Chuba Hubbard as well. So I think a lot of times we give rookies like this ultimatum. We're like, yo, you're going to come in and immediately be the guy. Even Blake Corum in LA, it's like we didn't even see him get carries until just recently. He was barely seeing the field. And that was a player that was talked up this entire offseason too. So coming off the injury as a rookie with 2 running backs who are veterans in the league, one of them is playing really well. I just think that to expect that is tough. And like, if I had him, I'm trading him right now. Like the hype, I'm saying, yo, like he's going to be an RB2 down the stretch for you in the playoffs. He's going to be an RB2. Like I would be saying that he has RB1 upside down the stretch in the playoffs. And I think I'd be willing to sell him as that. Now, if I couldn't get at least RB2 value for him, now I hold him as a flex. And I'm like, okay, let's see what he has. Let me see him on the field, because then if he has a blow up week, I can either ship him out or decide if I want to hold him. But for now, I think I'm selling on the name Jonathan Brooks and like trying to gain back any of that draft capital that I spent on him as a top 25 running back. If I can get somewhere close in the RB2 land, I'm setting that shit up.
Oh yeah, let that shit go. Cause I don't know, I'm not that high on him. He's not, it's like, I feel like that his draft class wasn't even that dope at the RB position, right? Like, and he was the first RB taken, right? Being injured. So I don't know. Like, I think that these guys, down the field, they may not be anything special, but there is hype about him. There is hype around his name. It's just not coming from me.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you have him. I think you've waited this long. You're probably gonna have to ride this thing out unless a winning team decides to come save you at that point. Yeah. What about Diontae Johnson? You think Diontae Johnson? He's been rocking since Andy Dalton has been the guy, and there's been like some light trade rumors about him getting moved, but for the most part, it seems like Dave Canales has been like, "Yo, Diontae Johnson's our guy," and he's played like that. Like I've never been a big Diontae Johnson guy, but he's had now a few strong weeks with Andy Dalton. I think he had one bad week with him. But are you buying Diontae Johnson? Like I've seen crazy talk about Diontae Johnson being like a top 12 receiver rest of the way, a top 15 receiver rest of the way. Shit. I think if I had Diontae Johnson, I would be looking to capitalize on anything. Yeah, anybody that believes he's the top 15, top 12 guy the rest of the way, send that shit up.
Yeah, there's just so much shit with Diontae Johnson, right? It's like, like when you're looking at, losing teams and players that they may sell, right? Like the teams themselves. If you're looking at like the Carolina Panthers and they have veterans, if their contract is expiring, they're older, and the team has nothing to play for, chances are they're going to explore the trade market. So he's going to probably go to another team. We see that with players like Alvin Kamara. We see that with players like himself, right? Like there's no incentive for the team to keep them or re-sign them, right? They're just not going anywhere. So he falls into that category. And if I have him on my team, I'm just like you. I'm trying to sell the shit out of him, right? And if I could get anything, if I could pair him with another player and get an upgrade at wide receiver, that's probably the move I'm looking to do because he is productive right now. Another negative thing that he got going towards him, the team's not going to continue to play Andy Dalton if they don't have a reason to, right? So if they pivot back to Bryce Young, that's going to sink the shit out of his value itself. Right. So even if he does stay on the team and they go to Bryce Young, that's gonna tank his value. So I like if I have him, I'm really happy because I have somebody who I can just carelessly trade off and sell him as like a wide receiver too, and send him to the next person because you and I think like this, but a lot of casual players see that and be like, oh, why is it? Oh, he's performing like he's what. Yeah, let me go ahead and get him. Yeah, on a points-per-game basis, he's doing this. Oh, yeah, let me go. Like, that's a good deal for me. But, forward thinkers and the people who are just hired, more elevated than the betas, that's a move you have to make. You have to get his ass off.
He is like the definition of sell high candidate. And when I think of like a player you could go target, I think like somebody who's had a couple bad games here recently, like a DK Metcalf. You could pair Diontae Johnson up with somebody else. Shit, you might be able to convince the person to do Diontae Johnson for DK 1-for-1, depending on who has them. Like, but I think DK Metcalf could be a really good like buy low type player. I'd be using Diontae Johnson in a whole lot of ways. We've already talked about like CeeDee Lamb. I think going in like maybe even targeting a guy who Cooper Kupp right now who's hurt, hasn't been on the field. You can go get Diontae Johnson for Cooper Kupp. You might be able to, I don't know, some of these leagues and these trades that I see, you might be able to pull that shit off. So it depends on the kind of league you're in, but I think at the end of the day, Diontae Johnson's not somebody I'd want on my team for the fantasy playoffs. Like if he happens to hit, I'd let that be against the person like somebody I'm playing against. Like I would much rather that be on somebody else's team than my team right now.
if you right now you go to the Diontae you have Diontae Johnson, a deal that would be perfect for you, and it would seem like an L for you. You go and you trade right now for Aaron Jones because he's hurt right now. You get Aaron Jones and George Pickens. Trust me, in a few weeks, that's going to be the biggest dub for you. Trust.
You might be able to pull off like a Debo Samuel, like a Tyreek Hill. Like you can use if you can use Diontae Johnson, if you have a strong enough second piece, somebody that's just been playing well recently. Like I don't know what kind. Sometimes the leagues are like, oh, my league would never do that, and then there's other leagues like, oh yeah, like my league trades all the time. It depends on your league. Depends on I get it. There's varying types of leagues, and also depends on if it's an 8-team league or 14-team league. But for the most part, if you can use Diontae Johnson to go get one of these star names at receiver, I'm doing that shit every single time.
Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Swift, go get A-Chan. Go get A-Chan right now. You know what I'm saying?
Go get Brandon Ayuk in another piece for Diontae
Johnson. Ooh.
I would get creative with Diontae, boy.
I'm kind of mad I don't have Diontae, bro. I'm kind of mad, man. Damn, if I had Diontae, bro, because one of these things about trades, when you're trading and you're trading like a good player, you're like, I like the player, man. And I'm always preaching, like, take your feelings out of it, and that's going to make it a whole lot easier. Diontae is somebody I do not have feelings for who is performing. You know what I'm saying? He can go, bro. He can go. You know what I'm
listen,
saying?
That does it for our week 7 talk, man. P, it's been a lot of good convo, man. I feel like obviously when it comes to buying low, selling high, there's a lot of ways you can play it. But for these players that maybe have a little bit harder value to determine sometimes, I think this is a good talking point, man. Any parting thoughts on this?
Nah, man. It's the same old thing with me, man. When we're talking about trades, try not to fall in love with your players. You know what I'm saying? It's always about selling high. Treat it like a stock market. And just keep tapping in, man. Weekly, we're going to have these conversations for you with new players. You guys let us know in the comments what type of players that you want to talk about, and we'll give you the game, man.
And the last part of this, man, I would say do not pay attention too much to your record. Worry about winning this week. If you're a team that, you don't got to worry about playoffs if you're 1-5. Worry about winning a few games here. Like if you're 2-4, worry about getting to a 500 record. And if you're in the playoff, if you're 6-0, 5-1, don't count your eggs before they hatch. There's no other way for me to tell you that because I've had it happen to me in the worst way before. So do not count your eggs before the hats. Don't go selling for the playoffs. Get to your 8 wins first before you start making them kind of moves, man. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we will see y'all on the next one. You already know. Peace out.